I was recently asked why I don't use any wearables, which is a fair question considering that I'm very interested in tech-enabled personalized health and nutrition. So it's a fair question. So the details why I don't use it is I'll try and explain in this video. But let's start at the beginning. What is a wearable? So a wearable is a device that can be worn on your wrist or your finger or your arm that can track your health parameters. Such as your pulse rate. At the moment, wearables are used by around 44% of US adults, and in Europe, around 53% of adults track their blood pressure and their pulse rate on a daily basis, which is quite interesting. So in the old world, I would say wearables were seen as something that biohackers used, gym goers use all the time, want to have real-time data every second of the day to see or track their performance. There's also this perception that wearable data is woefully inaccurate and that it's only seen as a data point. So if you specifically know what it is that you want to look for, then you would just track that specific parameter. Well, things are really starting to change as there's an increased focus on kind of healthcare, tilting towards prevention. We also see wearables becoming more health trackers and really providing that data to provide insight into what you should be doing next. So we are moving beyond just data to providing actually insights that can be acted upon. So it's really become a device as part of self-health tracking, of self-monitoring, of self-management, which has really changed the game. And so increasingly it's actually being used, or wearable data is increasingly being used as a form of early detection and now being slowly integrated into medical care, so electronic health records, for example, specifically in areas where the data or the wearable has actually been validated. And of course, what we are also seeing now that we're kind of moving beyond just a wearable being something that is now a step count to something that can measure vitals, as blood pressure, for example. And so we're really seeing the shift from the value and the function of a wearable to something that is really an important lever in healthcare. And of course, with rapid advances in AI, such as generative AI and machine learning, the machine learning can actually then understand when things are going off track for you, when you should receive a notification that maybe your blood pressure is out of range. But we can also now see more generative AI being brought into solutions to be able to question your own data with questions that you can fill into a text box, for example. So we are seeing people being able to derive more value from their data, that longitudinal data from their wearables, so that they can make informed decisions about what they should be doing next. Now, we are still quite early, I would say, in terms of what is the evidence in terms of what you can do based on that, but there are certain things that can already be done. So what are the kind of struggling moments for individuals? Well, we know that not all individuals are digitally literate. We also know that people don't know sometimes what to track, and sometimes they don't know for how long to track before they get very overwhelmed with data, and they don't want a wearable to become stressful in the end. So you don't want to wake up stressed because your sleep data says that you didn't go into deep sleep for a specific number of hours. And so we are reaching a point now with wearable data and insights that there needs to be a good balance between, what is the data saying, what can you do, what can't you control, and actually when can you stop using your wearable and just use the wearable to provide you measurements on an infrequent basis and still provide you insight into your health. And so coming back to the question about why I don't use one, it's not that I never used one. I have used, a step counter, for example. I've used a, Fitbit, and I didn't use it, I would say, for very long. Because I've started noticing, of course, I know my own body very well. So I know when I didn't sleep well enough. I know when I'm stressed. I know that my travel throws off, my microbiome and my eating and my sleep. And I know how long it takes me to recover if I have traveled and I need to get back into my exercise routine. I know how my diet impacts my body and how my energy levels and my mood. And so I also know kind of how far I need to walk to get in 6,000 steps, or how long that actually takes me. I wouldn't have actually known that if I didn't measure that. So I think it's important for, people who are thinking about a wearable or are not using one yet, that it can provide you insights and that objective data that you may not be aware. So we have a huge problem, of course, with individuals wanting to live a healthier lifestyle, but they don't know where to start, and they don't know what to measure, and they don't actually know how to put that into an action plan. So for me, it was important to kind of get that baseline data. Now I know, how many steps, I know how many days, I know how many hours I need of sleep to get better. And after that, I don't need a wearable to tell me how to do that anymore, because I've made the connection between data and actually how I feel. And so for that, I don't really need to use a wearable every single day. However, if you don't know, and if you don't know when to change things, or how fast you take to recover, or how long it takes you to walk a mile, for example, then a wearable can be a very, very useful tool. So I think you should have one if you have no idea about your vitals, like if you only know your blood pressure when you go to the doctor once a year, then it's probably good to have an idea of how you respond on a daily basis, or how does stress impact your body as well. Based on a recent study, the most common markers that I used are blood pressure, blood sugar, heart rate, blood oxygen, and ECGs, which is quite interesting. So we can see that wearable data, whilst considered totally inaccurate before, are now becoming a data point that can be useful to kind of inform in real time how an individual is doing. So the other point is also not to get obsessed with the data. So if you find that you are starting to get very anxious about your data, that you're constantly checking your phone or your watch, then it's probably not a healthy behavior. But I would say get to a point where you are informed, write it down if you have to do it manually in a book, but you can only work or only manage what you actually measure. And so that's very important. So how does the future of personalized health look like? Well, I definitely think that wearables are an important element of that personalized health in terms of prevention, in terms of health span, and of course it will be more and more integrated into your electronic health record, or even the record that the data that you control yourself, that you will then also be able to share with your professionals or your retailers, for example. So this is how I see the future going. And of course, what we can see is that once this data is shared with your healthcare professional, that it then becomes a partnership in terms of you managing your day-to-day, and you proactively discussing with your doctor or your clinician what you should be doing, or what is the best approach, what interventions you should be adopting, are there any new habits that you should be adopting to be able to optimize or manage your health. So I think the future is definitely more objective, but I also think that on the other hand, we don't need to be measuring all the time. We should be measuring until we've made the connection between what we do, what we eat, and also how we feel at the same time.